So I am just going to very quickly or briefly go through sort of a timeline of the case when it started, or from when it started in May of 2013 to where we are, how we got to where we are today, and then I'll open it up for any questions at that point. As mentioned in the press release, part of this investigation, during this investigation, we were able to find out that baby Precious was given a name before she passed. Her name was Amara, so I will be referring to her as Amara as I speak, just so for any confusion's sake. So the morning of May 28th, 2013, workers at a recycling plant, or recycling center, I should say, in North Portland, found the deceased baby Amara on one of the conveyor belts, going through their daily sorting of recycling materials, and that sort of started the ball rolling. That initially was very significant investigation involving Detective Christina Coffey and Eric Kammerer were the leads initially, and they put in a ton of work trying to track down things like the trucks that had come and dumped material, the routes, any video from where the pickups were done. There was, as you know, immense amount of public outcry. Or not public outcry, public requests for public assistance and things like that. And ultimately, that didn't produce any actionable leads. At that time, also, DNA was sent from the baby, Amara, and placenta that was found also was sent to OSP Crime Lab to try and see if we could get any matches within the various databases, and that didn't show up anything either. In May, or actually, so I picked up this case in May of 2019. A couple months prior to that, my partner and I stood up here talking about closing the Anna Lavka case, the first use of forensic investigative genetic genealogy for the police bureau. And that was the beginning of 2019. And immediately we started looking for other cases that we could, that might be available for this. And this was one of two that we sent off in spring of 2019. So we sent off blood samples from the ME's office, the state medical examiner's office, to Bode Technologies. It's a private forensic lab in Virginia. And the Bureau's partnered with them for a number of things, but they are our primary partner now with when it comes to forensic investigative genetic genealogy work. So we sent off samples in May of 2019. They did their initial processing of that and uploading it into the consumer databases, and were not able to get any close relative matches that would generate anything. So the case sort of went back on the shelf for a little bit. In December of 2020, Bode called me up and said there had been new submissions to the databases that now they were able to find a pretty close familial match. Unfortunately, that match was uploaded anonymously, so we had no idea who this person was. We did have an email address, however, and through that we were able to track this person down. And then we had another roadblock. This person was adopted, so we had no actual biological family to work with them. So the next 6 or 8 months were spent going through the courts to get access to adoption records in Utah and Idaho. And that ultimately in July of 2021, that got us to identifying a local family that was involved in this. And between July of 21 to 2 weeks ago, when this case was presented to the grand jury, we've really been working on what happened to Amara. And as you know, a man named Alnath Omar Oliver has been indicted for a number of charges. He goes by Omar, so if I mention him as Omar, the suspect is who I'm referring to. And ultimately what we found was Omar, 10 years ago when he was in his 40s, had a relationship with a then 15-year-old who, for obvious reasons, we will not be identifying. That relationship produced a child, Amara, and the circumstances surrounding her birth that night and Omar's actions and then her death are what resulted in the charges for Omar. That, again, we're not going to get in too many of those details specifically, but And given that, I'll open up to any questions.
At the time, it was, as you said, there was a lot of public outcry, as I recall.
Yes.
And also help for, you guys asked for help, and I guess, would you characterize this case as another example of somebody, it's a cold case for a while, but it eventually, it's just a matter of getting the information, and as technology upgrades, you kind of make the progress. It seems like, to me, it seems, wow, it's kind of a stretch that you got to this far. Is it just police work? How do you describe how we got here?
Well, I think, when the cold case unit initially was created in 2004, the whole purpose behind it was because we had got to a point where forensic science had now got to a point where we could leverage that on older cases that weren't available, the science wasn't available at the time. With newer techniques, the forensic investigative genetic genealogy, and whole genome sequencing, and all these things that are now coming online, we're in a little bit, maybe not to that extent, but in a little bit of the same window, where we can now look back at all those cold cases that we still have, that we basically tried for the last almost 20 years, and now we kind of have a window where we have a whole new batch of cases that we can work, this being one of them. So that's, and yes, it's exactly like that, where we just keep tabs on them, and we keep tabs on the technology, and as soon as we come across somewhere where we think those things will marry, we jump on it.
Also, I feel like for the folks out there, families especially, wanting some sort of explanation, and also perpetrators must be feeling like, nobody's getting away with that anymore.
Right. Well, I guess it's part of our job to keep them uncomfortable, so that's the hope.
Are you able to say if the mother of this child is still alive?
Mother is still alive. She's very aware of this. She testified at grand jury. She knows what's going on. But yes, and she is, the relationship between Omar and her is sort of the nexus for that rape 3 charge that you saw in the. So not only is she juvenile, but she's also a juvenile sex assault victim. So hence we won't be providing any more details about her.
Right. Detective, how did this case impact you?
Well, this case, it's been a long time coming. Working cold cases, you get used to working cases for long periods of time. But this was 4 years that I worked on this, and it's been a long time coming. There are a lot of details about this case that we can't release that are very, very unique. But for me personally, anytime we get to close a cold case, I feel very good about it. It's a sort of a passion of mine, cold cases. But with such a particular victim in this case, such vulnerability, it was very, very fulfilling to close this one.
And when it comes to the suspect, you'll have to forgive me, I have not read the press release. Was he arrested here?
Yes. Yes. So the indictment, the grand jury voted, and the indictment came out on Monday, and he was arrested either late this afternoon or late this morning or early this afternoon here in Portland.
Were other agencies involved in helping you with this? It sounds like you had other states where you were working on things.
Yeah, that's actually something I did want to mention. So when part of the genealogy investigation and accessing those other records, I did get a lot of support from Boise Police Department. And for the arrest was carried out by our U.S. Marshals Task Force.
That's all.
Well, how many years did you spend working this case?
I picked it up in spring of 2019, so 4.
Is this the longest case where you use genetic ID stuff?
It is, but at the same time, there was a lot between COVID and all the rioting and disruptions going on, a lot of things that sort of pulled us in a lot of different directions. So this case probably would have been a shorter sort of time frame solve if we, if we didn't have those other resource drains.
What drives you in this kind of work? Because you mentioned you ran into a couple roadblocks and had to keep, things come up and then you got to put it back down. Is there a particular thing that drives you on a case like this?
Ultimately, just getting some sort of, we don't in cold case use the term closure because closure it sort of implies an end. And for victims of these crimes, it's not really an end, but a resolution to sort of that ongoing thought of what's out there, what's happened to my child. So coming up with that resolution is really the driving force. Yeah.
To that point, Detective, you guys don't do this job to pat yourselves on the back, but this took a dogged approach, didn't it? I mean, this clearly didn't happen. This did not happen overnight, clearly. It was years and years of work, dead ends, keep going, that sort of thing.
Yes, but I think there's a tremendous value in doing it, and that's why we do it, right, is that resolution for families. And this particular family, ultimately this sort of tore, is one of the things I can tell you is the mother of the child was not aware that her child was deceased. She has believed from day one that Omar had taken the child to a hospital. And so this did not provide that sense of resolution that we normally seek. This really sort of devastated this family, unfortunately. But I think getting resolution, whether it's good or bad, I think is an absolutely noble goal that we try for.
And then just explain what happens from here on out. I mean, clear to most people, but maybe not to everyone. Like, he's arrested now. What happens next?
Yeah, so he was arrested. He's in custody. As far as whether he will stay in custody, depends a lot on things like his criminal history and previous violence and the court's decision. And I don't know how that's going to shake out. I can tell you that I don't believe he does not have a significant violent conviction record. So, but I don't know whether he was going to be released pending trial or not. He will have an opportunity to have a trial, as everyone does. Whether he chooses to do so or make some agreement through his attorney with the DA's office will be up to those folks making those decisions. But yeah, he's indicted, he's charged, and then now it's really up to the prosecutor's office and the courts to figure out from here.
Is this a harder case because of the fact that it was a baby, a child? Those cases tend to be harder for you guys?
This is the only child homicide I've ever worked, and I've never worked child sex abuse cases or anything like that, personally for that very reason. I know lots of people feel the same way. Other people feel like the exact opposite, like these are that we have to work these cases. I think you're just going to get a very, very individualized answer for that. For me personally, I actually didn't find this case any more difficult. I certainly wouldn't want to do it regularly, though.
Anything else, guys? Let me make sure Amy...
Let me have you say and spell your name.
And your title?
Yeah.
Sure. My name is Detective Brendan McGuire. It's BrendanMcGuire.
Hey, Amy, did you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Detective. My name's Amy Green. I'm a reporter with the Oregonian. Apologize, I couldn't make it there in person. Can you describe what kind of testing led you to this adopted relative? Was it like 23andMe? Was it one of those home test kits?
Well, yes and no. It's a little so. The sort of criminal justice and law enforcement, when we do forensic genetic genealogy testing, we do not have access to 23andMe or Ancestry or most of those direct-to-consumer tests. But what we do have access to is two companies, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. And what those are if you as a consumer take a 23andMe or Ancestry test, and then for whatever reason you take the extra step of uploading your results into one of these other databases. So we don't have access to 23andMe, but we do have access to people who have intentionally uploaded their 23andMe results to these other databases. It's much smaller databases. And under very specific circumstances involving violent crimes, we can upload crime scene samples or unidentified subject samples into these databases to look for family sort of matches, if you will, not direct matches, but we'll find perhaps a cousin or uncle, etc., and then we can start building family trees and look at who our unidentified subject, whether it's a unidentified remains case or whether it's a suspect crime scene sample, who that may be.
So this person, this relative, did a home kit test for DNA, and then at some point in 2020 uploaded their results onto an online registry.
Yes.
Okay. Can you say if the DNA is linked to the dad or the mom?
Mom.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Mom. Yes, the connection through the database was through the maternal line.
Okay. And the father's DNA was not on file, like in the criminal database in Oregon, because he hadn't been convicted of a felony in Oregon. Is that correct? That's how you wouldn't have been able to tell from testing the tissue of the baby initially?
That is correct. However, that's absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay. Did Mr. Oliver cooperate in filling in the details of what happened after the baby's birth?
He did. The vast majority of what we know about what happened to Amara came from Omar and the mother.
Okay. I know you can't get too much into the details, but the indictment says alleges criminal mistreatment for allegedly withholding adequate food, physical care, and medical attention. Can you describe at all more what that means? Like there was no, like zero care given to this baby, no milk, no fluids. How about like heat, keeping it warm?
Yeah, so what I can tell you is from the moment that the defendant was aware of the pregnancy, he prevented both the mother from going to seek any medical care, prenatal or otherwise, including after in the immediate, like she gave birth on his floor, and he prevented her from going to seek any medical attention. He then took the child from from his apartment, and in the course of walking to a hospital, the baby passed, and when he found the baby unresponsive, he refused to take that baby to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And it's believed he put the baby in recycling that was picked up by a truck.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.